Welcome to the Energy InSites podcast, your source for the latest insights in deep retrofits, renewable energy, and energy conservation. Now, let's get to today's insights. My guest today spends his days turning building science into walls that actually hold their heat. He's Jesse Watson, Director of Business Development with Winnipeg's Quick Therm Insulation Solutions. Quick Therm is a Canadian company that makes exterior insulation for some of the coldest climates in the country. Jesse Watson, welcome to Energy InSites.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate to be here and looking forward to a great conversation with you today.
Yeah, me too. I think we met a little over a year ago at one of the conferences, and then we had you into our office to do a lunch and learn with our team, and everybody got real excited about your products. Of course, we love supporting Canadian companies. So why don't we, start from the past? We'll get to the present, and then we'll talk about the future. So tell us a little bit about Jesse Watson and Quick Therm and kind of how you came to work together and your background in the industry, how you got into this particular niche, and a little bit about Quick Therm.
Perfect. Love it. You said we had an hour, right? I think I might need about a couple hours, but I'll try and...
Yeah. We'll do the Coles Notes version for our listeners. And hopefully we get some, we typically have building operators, asset managers, community leaders, policy makers. These kinds of things are our audience. And so, energy conservation, renewable energy, decarbonization, these are all hot button issues for a lot of people in the country. And I think you guys have something really great to offer there. So we'll try to keep it as brief as we can, but we like to go deep here on Energy InSites. So let's unpack it.
Perfect. So Quick Therm, it's a really unique organization based in Winnipeg, Manitoba. The company itself has been around 15 years. They've always had a really strong innovation background, manufacturing background, but it all started with below grade under slab perimeter exterior insulation. And at the time, there are a couple products on the market, but Quick Therm, being a bit unique, kind of developed a product that had a laminated facer on it. So essentially just became a more durable solution, a more easier product to use, less accessories, and had some building science built in due to the laminate. And the really neat thing is they were one of the first companies to bring it to market, and they started promoting it and growing it. But classic, with patents and things like that, there wasn't anything really stuck to it at the time, and other manufacturers gravitated that way, and it kind of just became a commodity product in a race to the market. But in classic fashion with innovation and manufacturing, and building a strong passion for building science, the founder, Ted Cullen, and Ryan Cullen, his son, were, where do we fit in the market? What would be a cool opportunity? And they really gravitated to above grade wall assemblies. So they basically, they're looking at everything and, how do walls perform? What are the challenges? And what they recognized right out of the gates was moisture management. You can insulate, but if you can't manage moisture, you're just, you're wreaking havoc on your building. And at that point, you might as well not insulate. So, they go to the drawing board, they come up with a couple ideas, and one of them ended up becoming a corrugated profile to the back of the product. So they just took regular exterior rigid insulation and then added a profile to it. And what this allowed the product to do was essentially dry to the outside. I always use a great analogy of you take two pieces of flat glass and moisture gets trapped in between them. They're not going anywhere. But if we can allow an opportunity for moisture to move, like, for example, a grain of sand, it allows moisture to slip out. So that was kind of the principle of it. And so this corrugated back profile of their standard foam, was able to achieve a patent, was heavily tested, achieved a lot of engineering for various building types. And it was a really great solution. So they're really proud. They said, we've solved the world's problems. We figured it out.
And what's that made out of, that backing?
So the insulation itself would be type 2 EPS.
Okay.
So which is really great because it becomes vapor permeable itself as its own raw material.
And for the layman out there, is that your typical Home Depot pink rigid foam?
No, what it would be, it'd be like a white foam. We would see like a white foam. It gets kind of compared to like coffee cup foam, styrofoam cup, the bead
Okay.
foam. That would be kind of the generic version of it. The, the the type of foam that we are using though is a more commercially grade, obviously higher density material. So when we look at it as actually as a whole, that it was a sheet, it was a 4 foot by 8 foot sheet. We could make it up to 2 inches to 6 inches thick. So really impressive thicknesses. And it, like I said, had this corrugated profile
Hmm.
on the back. And
So the
we
corrugation is part of the way you're making the foam, or it's a separate piece that you're attaching to it?
it was part of the foam itself. So we would
Okay.
make the foam in that shape. And then when we apply the laminate to it, it obviously adhere and follow the corrugation, and we'd perforate that. So we created breathability and moisture management. So we lived and died by those buzzwords, drying, moisture management, breathability. And so again, we've solved the world's problems, and we get to market, we're pushing it. For the diehard guys understood moisture management, it worked really well. But when you get into the masses where money means everything, uh, we hit a roadblock because it was a few cents a square foot more
Right.
than the traditional way. And the thing was, buildings weren't falling down tomorrow with the conventional way of doing things. So people would gravitate, let's just save money. So that was a little frustrating right out of the gates. And so we said, okay, well, if money's everything, let's think about this. Let's innovate again. We're an innovative, we're a resilient Winnipeg manufacturer. And so what we realized is traditionally you would hang your insulation and then apply wood strapping to the outside. So it's a two-step process. So then we said, well, why don't we just combine those two technologies? Why don't we take that same foam, 4 foot by 8 foot sheet, um, type 2 EPS with a reflective polymer laminate? We got that moisture management corrugation. Well, why don't we let in the furring and laminate it all together? So what we would have essentially, we would have a product that's got 3 inch wide by 3/4 inch plywood strips running lengthwise of the product, space 16 on center. So we essentially eliminated a step from install, and then we've just simplified the overall process. So we're like, this has got to be patented. Someone's got to have thought of this, right? And we did our homework, looked through the market, and it had never existed. So we were able to patent that, and we're really, really impressed with how it came together as a product. So through that 15-year window, it was kind of below grade, industry changing, and then it went into Gen 1, we'll call it, product. And then today we've developed, so the last 3 years we've been promoting this product called Air Dry Connect. So that would be the product, the focus that we are today. So we still offer those other products. They have their own niche solutions, but Air Dry Connect is the marquee solution of our organization. And so what it's done for us is created this massive jumping off into the industry. So when we developed the product, we went, well, what's the perfect solution? Where do we fit? We've got this aha moment. And what's really special about QuickTherm is they've got an extremely great network from trades, consultants, engineers, And so you go to your resources and network. And one of the large trade contractors locally, we said, what would you do with this? And what was fascinating is we were always in the wall thinking. Walls were kind of our focus in our mind. And then they gravitated us to standing seam metal roofing.
Hmm.
And so that was kind of like a head scratcher because we're not roofing people. We were never, it was just, insulation, we picture walls. And what we found through R&D and research, that the traditional way of doing things is a very laborious, material-based process. So a lot of steps, you'd be layering your insulation with a lot of accessories, you're building up your roof assembly, and then eventually your cladding attachment. And so what we recognized is because we can make the panel really thick, we can achieve multiple layers. So what we found, we could attach through the wood to the roof, fasten your first layer. Then you take your second layer and attach it to the first layer, and you can even do 3 layers. So we could actually achieve an 18-inch thick overall roof assembly, but it was just linked by screws. And there was nothing else attached, no other accessories, no foam, no tape, no fuss. So we're like, wow, like this is cool. Like we were in the wall sector. We were thinking walls, and we recognized that roofing was actually this big aha moment. And then again, like the jumping off point, you start looking at the engineering and the performance of it. So plywood is structural. So we're getting insane wind lift requirements that we can achieve across the country. So we look at the harshest climates, which is the Arctic. So that ends up becoming a really interesting talking point. And then the thermal bridging side of it. So again, we're in the building envelope. We're like, oh, well, thermal bridging, that's a critical factor to building performance.
Yeah.
So we find, when you're a small organization, credibility ends up being, your biggest marketing tool. So we worked with some of the biggest names in the industry for some engineering and performance testing, and we found out that with a simple fastening pattern, we could achieve anywhere in Canada as far north as you can go. And the thermal bridging was less than 4%. So we're like, this is a magical a system that we developed.
And just as a quick reference point, how does that stack against standard construction method thermal bridging?
Well, it's funny because as the codes are changing to force yourself to exterior insulate, everything was looked at as a nominal R value. You're putting insulation on, that's great. Continuous exterior insulation, that's great. You put a R5 per inch, must be R5 on the wall. But then as the walls got thicker and the code started driving, we started seeing that there's these accessories, and they're really conductive accessories.
Mm.
And so when you start going to the comparison game, we started seeing values of between 20 to 50% loss on
Right.
these walls.
You see it all the time in the urban environment with older homes that have 2x4 or 2x6 roof construction. And in the sort of shoulder season and in the winters, you can just tell where the heat's losing out of the house because you see the lines of the joists melted
Clear as day, clear as day.
clear as day. And for those of you out there, if you ever see that when you're walking down the street, that's a clue that that house is leaking like a sieve, heat that should be retained within it, and that's thermal bridging.
And again, you kind of have the attitude of, well, we're doing better than what we were doing before, but we were never really looking closely at how poorly it was before, right? Energy bills were relatively affordable. You can just pay to turn the heat up more. As we see that change dramatically in the industry, it becomes more and more important. So yeah, we came out with this system. We've coined the term the matrix system. We love that because the way the plywood furring runs down the product when they lap, we create a matrix with the product. So it's kind of a fun system that we developed that way. But anyhow, it just created this whole unique environment for really technical, from something that was just a foam insulation to something really structural and really, really high performance. And then the next transition was, well, we can do this on the walls. Same concept, right? So we were able to dive into the engineering on that, and it's the exact same principle, whether it's a single layer of insulation just put on your wall or multiple layers. So it ended up becoming a really nice continuous envelope full system for buildings. And at the same time, we were like multifamily residentially kind of beginnings, and then it went to this massive commercial world.
Mm.
We realized the greater thicknesses, the thermal performance, the engineering. But then when we take a step back, we found uh, you could take a single layer of our product and renovate grandma's home, pull off grandma's cladding on her house, put a 2-inch layer on, or we can do an extremely impressive passive house for someone. So it ends up becoming a really neat conversation how versatile a single product can be in the market. And every day that we communicate with individuals like yourself or trades in the industry, we find that there's new and new uh, attachment methods or new cladding that we can simplify things. So we're going through a really neat journey right now, and um, it's just been a really fun process. And I've been fortunate enough to be part of that process for about 4 years. And for me, what's been really exciting is Ted and the team. They came up with the concept. They put in the engineering. They put in the manufacturing, and then they recognized the industry needs a strong representative from a technical perspective. And I'd actually in my past life, I'm a spec writer by trade. I worked for a large architectural firm for over a decade, and I actually got to know QuickTherm through that process. I actually
Oh,
specialized
okay.
in their products. And so it's kind of this meet cute situation where the team would come over and promote their product, and I really gravitated to the concept, and there's just this opportunity that presented itself where they said, "Hey, would you be interested in helping us promote? Be our technical engineer, technical director. Look after promoting it and also helping us through navigating these waters." So it's kind of a really neat full circle on how I got to be pulled into that group. But what always stood out to me in the beginning with that group with QuickTherm is their passion for moisture management and performance. It was a really impressive. I have some cute stories where the team would I'd say, "Hey, there's a really great project here. I think you guys would be a great fit." And they would review the drawings and go, "No, we wouldn't fit on this. They're not using the right amount of insulation," or something
Mm,
along those lines. And so they had a really strong principle on they weren't going to be a part of something that wasn't going to work.
mm.
So seeing that was always a really neat process. And the again, I reference how the codes are changing where before putting insulation on nominally was acceptable. That was how we measured what we were doing. And these guys would come to me with effective R values. That was a really cool buzzword 10, 15 years ago. And I'm going, well, no one cares about effective R value. We just
Yeah.
need R5 per inch, or that was all we were looking at. And so they always looked at me like, no, that's not how this works. So
Yeah. Well, I know with the work that we do at the Leap Group, doing energy assessments on all kinds of buildings, it can be tough communicating to end users why something's important. You're describing some technology they don't fully understand. It's a lot of math and science, and even if you get into ROIs and NPVs and these kinds of things, not everybody gets that unless you're a CFO. But what I found was when we started doing thermal imaging, because some people learn by reading or listening, some people learn by seeing. And so when we started using the thermal camera on a building, and now you're seeing that dark purple line around the door frame, around the window frame, around the exhaust stack, parts of the wall where now you're seeing moisture and heat loss or heat gain. It became instantaneously understandable,
that's right.
and the level of motivation completely shifted. So now for us, thermal imaging and pictures within our reports is a must.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember in my college days that letting us play around with the infrared cameras too, and getting us educated on how they work and what to look for. And you're bang on with that. When you see a glowing red or dark black spot, it really really emphasizes, oh, there's a problem there. you know.
Yeah,
Um,
we've got our drone has a payload, a thermal camera payload as well. So we're getting really great roof shots, and it's so helpful, really, as an assessor and as a building operator, to see the weak spots in your building, to see those joists lit up like a Christmas tree, and to demonstrate what that thermal bridging really means. And then especially afterwards too, in terms of validating the work that's been done to show that consistent output, that it's all calm and neat and tidy once you've done that retrofit. So on that note, retrofit versus new construction within Quick Therm's business, what would you, if you were to allocate a percentage to each, what would you say you guys are sitting at currently?
I would say right now we're probably 80-20 new to retrofit right now.
Okay.
Um, we are seeing an uptick in retrofit, being with the cost of new construction just being astronomical. So we are seeing, for a great example, there's a community center locally here that northern community that they've decided to expand the building instead of knocking it down, and they've invested that ROI to upgrade the envelope, and they're seeing huge paybacks and benefits from going that route. But yeah, that market hasn't been as reoccurring as we'd like to see because we offer a great solution, and obviously at the end of the day, we can repurpose buildings efficiently. There is a way, but yeah, I'd say about 80-20 right now.
Yeah, certainly once you get in with architects, general contractors, there's a really well established pipeline for new construction. It's a simpler, cleaner installation process. Everything's, well, presumably everything's square and plumb and true, and it's easy. You don't always see that in reality, but certainly one of the challenges in the retrofit space that we've seen in Canada is older buildings that are wonky. And when you come with a prefab thing that's very perfectly, factory made, getting that to fit the janky window, or the outcropping of pipes and different things can be challenging. How have you guys approached that?
We've been pretty fortunate with our product because it's very modifiable. So windows out of square, cut it out of square. Um, Logistically, it's a light and easy product to use. So it's foam with plywood strips, so there's not a great burden for I have to hang this heavy thing over my head or a specialized equipment. So we're really lucky to be able to contribute to that. We do a large part of our work is in the Arctic, northern communities. So it becomes a great resource for when labor rates are at a premium, material costs are difficult in logistics, especially in regions like Nunavut. So we can ship large quantities of material up there, and then they'll make it work essentially, which is a strong benefit that way. There's no oops, we shipped the wrong size and can't use it.
Yeah.
So we see a big benefit that way. And what I also like, again, I when I was kind of crossing over to this side of the world, it was I never had really a sales side, but I fell naturally um, really a loving and believing in it because it was so easy to use. And when people, I come from a carpentry background growing up, and you work with your hands, and is it easy? Can you use a saw? Can you use a drill? Becomes really powerful. You don't need $10,000 tools or specialized equipment that way. And what I also get kind of excited about is we can rely on local labor in those communities. So there'll be regions where they can hire locals, they can train youth, and get everyone involved. It's not ooh, you're not a red seal trade. I'm sorry, that's not.
Hmm.
So so we hit a really fascinating holistic approach to all of these building types.
Yeah. And certainly in the north, where we do a lot of work up there, you can see $1 a kilowatt hour. So when I see stuff like that, I really emphasize jacking the insulation as much as humanly possible. paying to kind of continually heat a leaky space at those kind of rates is just not sustainable. Um, and I think codes haven't really caught up to that yet because we lived in this abundant century in Canada of cheap gas and cheap electricity and wanting to build things cheap. And, you know, 2x4s, now we're at 2x6s, but even then it's, the minimum standards. Um,
Well, in Manitoba here, one of our investors or one of our owners, he has a commercial development park, and we've been really fortunate to use. I wouldn't use the word guinea pig, but push the envelope literally on some of their projects. And Manitoba is known for the one of the cheapest utility rates in the country with our
yeah.
hydroelectric. So we're and Manitoba is notoriously cheap to begin with.
Yeah. And it's a blessing and a curse.
And
Yeah.
so the owner, he's building land, leasable spaces. So he plays landlord, he's a commercial developer, and he said, I really, really want to, increase the sustainability and energy efficient of our buildings. So 16,000 square foot office footprint, 2 stories, and he had a particular demands. It was, I don't want any penetrations in my roof. Roofs leak. Let's limit that. I want to increase the R value and to keep my energy efficiency down so that I can pass on those savings to my tenants. They're not having to pay these utility rates, and I can still maintain my market share rent. I'm not having to. I paid for premium building. I have to jack up the rent on that price. So we went through the design effort, and what they were able to do because of increasing the R value on the roof and walls, they were able to eliminate rooftop units and penetrations through the roof. So the only penetration on an 8,000 footprint is a single 1.75 inch stack, and
Wow.
which that actually drove him insane because he's going like we
He
could
wanted
pipe.
that gone too.
Yeah, yeah.
So
We,
the Overton window shifted for him. His standards are now super high thanks to you guys. That makes me think of a couple of things. One, if you're a REIT or a real estate developer, certainly on the case you're making about penetrations, insurance, flood damage risk, water damage risk, like you've mitigated a ton of those things, which is amazing for a whole bunch of reasons. The other one is, I know over the years, from my background in lighting, industrial and commercial lighting projects, there was always this rub between triple net leases. You talk to the owner of the building because it's like their building, like you guys want to buy these lights, and they're like, well, but the tenant pays the electricity bill. You talk to the tenant, they're like, yeah, I want to save money on my electricity bill, but I don't own this building, so why am I going to drop 300 grand on lights? And it worked. Like, you would get situations where the landlord would invest, you would get situations where the tenant would invest, but you would also have a lot of jobs where people didn't go ahead for because there's this conflict. And one of the things that I realized was that, when you've got an option A and option B as a tenant, I'm gonna take this space or I'm gonna take this space. The one that has the lower energy consumption or the lower energy cost basis makes you more inclined to take the other. And so as a landlord, if you can invest in your asset and create a situation where it's a lower cost to operate, that gives you a competitive advantage to get that tenant, number one. Number two, you actually have the ability to increase the rents. And when you start to look at the cost of the thing that you did to get there, in this case, insulation improvement, let's say it's $100,000, right? If you can now charge an extra, I don't know, a couple bucks a foot or a couple cents a foot per year, you can apply that to your net operating income and your cap rate on your building valuation. And so if people actually take the time to go all the way through that value chain, what I have found is that you can get an exponential pop in the value of your asset by making that conversion, because it's let's say 5% cap rate. You're 20 times whatever extra dollars you're getting in rent.
Absolutely. And we got to experience that firsthand right out of the gates because, not only did they reduce, penetrations, rooftop units, yada, 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 they saved ladder cages on a building, having after hour services. So there's all these like secondary benefits, but the funnest was the financials. So hydro comes in and, buildings built, we're going to estimate your utility usage. Your Manitoba, 16,000 square foot building, they get their first bill. And by the time I think they paid the first bill, they ended up paying credits back to hydro for an entire year, paying it off with credits. So the owner goes, I knew I paid for an energy efficient building. I paid for these upgrades, but I didn't think it'd be that crazy. It's never as good as it all you think it's going to be, right?
Yeah.
So we did an Energy Star case study on this. We love case studies. We love, diving into the numbers. And the building achieved a 98th percentile in Canada of that type of building. And the utilities were supposed to be paying $22,000 a year. He's paying $8,800.
Wow.
Like that was just like right out of the gates. We were just laughing. We're going, and then we had to write another report because we're like, okay, we got to tell people why, it's thermal bridging and air tightness. And,
Yeah.
So you're bang on. And if you actually take that time and really look at your ROI in the grand scheme, it compounds. And as I said in the beginning, I'm in Manitoba. I have the cheapest utilities. What happens
Yeah.
in Nunavut when it's diesel at, 10
Well,
times the cost?
the reason I made the comment earlier about it's a blessing and a curse in Manitoba, we have a number of clients in Manitoba, and it's great that it's like 8 cents, 9 cents, compared to the rest of Canada. They're laughing. But the problem is it makes it really hard to justify upgrades because your ROIs are not as good as when it's $1 a kilowatt hour and everything makes sense. And so to do a solar project, the payback is longer. To do windows and doors, the payback is longer. To do LED, the payback is longer. So we're at this weird crossroads where that's slowing down the adoption of these measures that we've all said publicly, federally, like we want to do this stuff. We want to do the decarbonization, the electrification, get more renewables. But when your power's cheap, it's like, there's other things you could do with that money for your business, let's say, even for your community.
And it's not sexy. Like you don't get to drive the insulation home every day,
Right.
It's the tough part. But
Right. The behind the wall stuff. This is why we're here. This podcast isn't for everybody, but if you're in this space, you get it. And hopefully you do now, because it makes a big difference.
It makes a big difference.
Even in terms of occupant comfort, right? When you go into buildings that are poorly insulated, one room scorching hot on the south side, the north side's freezing cold, drafty. If you work in or live in any space like this, chances are it's due to your external walls and your windows causing those issues.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. The what was the other one I had about that? Shit. I'll have to pass. I'll have to edit that one out.
So some case studies, you guys, and can people go on your website and find case studies?
Yes. Those case studies are available. This segues actually beautifully into what QuickTherm's done internally as a team. So we've invested into a design assist team. So we have highly technical individuals that for every single project that we work on, whether it's a napkin sketch, a phone call, or a full robust hospital project, we'll do a review. We produce a technical package illustrating the performance. If you give us the existing basis of design, we'll tell you how we outperform or compare. We'll also get into some energy modeling. We've done reporting for housing, commercial buildings. And then we'll get into fastener reviews, schedules like that. So we try and really take all the energy and effort out of it. We come from a really technical and informational process, but we also really believe in just the visualization. So we have some really good renderings for our clients. Sometimes clients I've had clients like, oh, a cool product, and then they forget there's wood built in. So we try and make it just everyone understands it. From our consultants, we can pass that on to them, to their clients. I know with your group, we've done a little bit, and the response we get is thank you. You've taken. I don't have to go to your website. I have to dig through a bunch of reporting. So we've invested into that, and it's been exponential for our team and stuff like that.
That's super helpful. Yeah, anytime a prospective customer can get their project evaluated and supported at the early concept stages, can save you a ton of money, be super valuable and helpful. Obviously you guys are somewhat biased in terms of wanting people to use your product, but at the same time, when you get a good vendor who kind of helps you walk through the steps, it's so great, and not everybody does that. So appreciate that. One question I have for you: when you step back and look at insulation as a topic, there's a whole bunch of different things and different pros and cons. Uh, so, for example, I think about pink fiberglass, traditional stuff. I think about rock wool, mineral wool stuff. I think about blown in insulation. That's been like a big thing these last number of years. And then I think about natural fiber stuff for the eco-minded people among us, straw bale with a stucco out coating and such. Let's take a second and go through each of those. And the one that I'm really curious about is the spray foam, expanding foam stuff, where they go in with hazmat suits and do all this. And particularly in the cold Canadian climate in the Arctic context, we recently did some research on the performance of these different things in different climate conditions, and found that below certain temperatures, certain ones really stand out as good performers, and other ones actually start to diminish their performance. And I don't think a lot of people know that. So maybe you could take a few minutes and talk about some of these different things with the different products, and what you're really trading off and what you're getting depending on the material.
Perfect. This is where my past spec writer, unbiased opinion of everything comes in really well. My educated, opinion. So it always comes down to, every insulation has its place, right? There's applications like mineral wool, for example, is a tremendous product. It has amazing fire rating properties, but it's not needed everywhere, right? You don't need to use mineral wool in every single building, because not every building needs a 2-hour fire rated wall. We look at the going back a few years too, is the R value. There's a real marketing game, right? R value. Everybody wants to know your R value. What's your R per inch? And you still get guys still to this day, R per inch.
Yeah, that seems to be the default for most of us.
And it's tough because, that's an easy metric to compare across the board right at the gates. But
right,
how are you using it at the end of the day? How is it being installed? That's where the decision maker really becomes in. And, the industry is learning through that process still. When the codes changes, you got to use, a certain amount of thickness. Heavy, bulky metal Z-girts was the solution, right? So even though you were paying at the time for an R8 per inch polyiso at the time, when that was being marketed and touted, that's not what was performing. So application.
Say that last part again, though, the heavy metal bit.
So as you start getting thicker on the wall, you need something to support it. So if it was just a single layer of 2-inch foam, a quick screw through the foam through the back to the wall would work. But when you get into 4 inches of that and hanging a metal cladding or something, you can't. So now you need subgirt systems or metal systems to hold them.
I see.
Right out of the beginning was, well, we'll just take 2 layers of hat channels and then stack them onto each other, which just metal channels. It would just perform miserably. So
because of thermal bridging.
Exactly. So then the industry changed and mitigated to thermal clips to try and create point bridging, which are great. They had a great place. But then it created this challenge of which insulation should I use? So kind of back to your question. So rigid foam was a really common solution for those applications. So you got these metal bars spaced on the wall in these commercial projects. Well, who's cutting all that foam around every single piece? So the industry fought back. You know, the consultants were designing. They just said, we're going to design this.
And that's because the it's like a U channel or a C channel, and you're actually
Yeah,
trying to slide that foam into that. Because
that's
if
right.
you just cut it, now you've got gaps, you got air gaps.
That's right. And there would be these point clips. They look like electrical outlet boxes or different variations. And so you got to cut around those. And so, you know, the consultants did the rigid foam because the rigid foam was great, you know. Then there was these subgirt system, substructure accessories, which were great. They put them together, great. Well, the trades went, you know, threw their hands up and said, well, it's taking me 10 times as long to do this. So,
Right.
you know, then we seen materials switch through to bat type products like mineral wool. So it was easier to compress, and okay, that was great. But then we're playing back in the R value game. So we're losing R value over labor. So it becomes a challenge on it goes back to what makes the most sense for which system
Mm.
on that side of things. Um, as I mentioned, the R value game, they all come in at varying level of R values. You can take the lowest R value product, and if you use a simple install system, it could outperform some of the higher R value products. So you got to really look at what that takes into effect.
When
Um,
you say a simple install system, you just mean the total cost of the project now? And it
yeah,
outperforms because, even though your bills are a little higher, you've paid so much less that like you're still ahead of the game? Or do you mean in terms of
on the wall.
the thermal bridging aspects of simplicity?
Yeah. So if I use bias the quick therm, you know, we don't need any accessories. So we will attach our product, which is a 4.2 per inch R value. So there's our number. But we don't have any accessories or things to require. It's screw through our plywood to the wall. Perfect. We'll compared to polyiso, for example, that as an R6 per inch, depending on which market you're in. So we always get criticized. Well, you're not R6. Well, how do you install polyiso? Well, you need some sort of clip and rail system or a subsystem. When we start modeling, then that's where we see where we will outperform because of the system. So again, it comes back to what are we trying to achieve here, and how
Hmm.
simplify the system. Um, the bad insulations and all those other products, they're great for cavity solutions. I mean, Pink and all the other different manufacturers, they've actually increased their technology on sound properties. They've really invested into, because if we can gain more acoustic properties, that's always been a beneficial that way. Um, I am a true believer of outboard insulation purely if we can simplify the wall and not have to put cavity insulation and exterior insulation. I find that if we can keep the entire building exterior insulated from a continuous perspective, we're going to save moisture issues
Really?
and simplify that.
So, because almost every building you ever go into, they got the framing, and then you got bats on the inside between the joists, studs, and then your vapor barrier and drywall. Let's say maybe different in a warehouse
Yeah,
environment. Um, do you actually think we can get away from that and just have
100%.
just have like drywall, like no vapor barrier, no nothing? Because on the outside of the plywood sheething, you've got this system.
That is the way to go. It simplifies everything from an install
Wow.
perspective.
Even in residential?
Yep, yep.
Wow.
So a good example is you could do R20 bad in a cavity wall and no exterior insulation. That meets code in Manitoba. Or you could do 4 inches of quick therm, or to be honest, any rigid foam on the outside would eliminate having any bad insulation completely. And the benefits to that would be you can eliminate your poly vapor barrier. Everything now is outboard of the wall sheathing. So now your moisture control, your air tightness, your R value, everything is continuous. You're getting a truer, cleaner wall assembly. So you pay a
Yeah.
premium, but what is it in the long run? Are we building
Right.
10-year homes or 50-year homes?
Well, one of my mentors, eco builder Paul Belanger, we talked many times about like how many homes are living and dying by tape. It's like the vapor barrier. I've installed vapor barrier many times on renovations, and like you're using tuck tape, and this like sticky caulking, and you're doing all this like janky stuff around all these orifices and trying to, stop it from getting in through the electrical outlet or wherever. And it's just a hodgepodge of time spent and bunch of different stuff, and like all the pieces you got to buy and back to Home Depot to get another roll of tape. And it's kind of a silly way to seal a house when you think about it.
On our projects that we've eliminated poly, the trades always jump with joy because they're going, I'm not going to wreck any more seats in my car from acoustic seal.
Acoustics. Oh yeah. Many a
Or
pant ruined.
we get really into air tightness testing. We believe air tightness is one of the most beneficial ways to increase efficiency and R value. And we find that when we compare to traditional methods where everyone says, oh, I've sealed that, I've taped that, and then you do a blower door test, they actually leak like a sieve still. Just because you visually can see it doesn't mean it's been done to the
Yeah,
way
and
you.
over time, and if you don't lap it the right way, there's a whole like science to taping, exterior, interior, the blue tape, the red tape. And it's you can do it better over time and get more proficient at it. But at the end of the day, you're still relying on a real like paper thin
Yeah, that's right.
adhesive that's going to lose adhesive over time. Like there's just a different thing. Anyway, I don't want to besmirch the
Yeah,
tape industry
for
here,
sure, for
but
sure.
there's definitely some limitations to what that can do when it comes down to the individual human installer.
So simplifying the wall. If we just wrap the building with a membrane on the exterior and your rigid foam or insulation that you need, you're done. You've
Yeah,
simplified it, and it's a lot easier working on the outside than the inside as well.
right.
So those are things that the codes will eventually get there. Again, it's this balancing act of affordability and performance. But I
And
think when people really look and crunch the numbers, it's not as dramatic as people believe it is.
okay. In a retrofit situation where the house already has or the building already has insulation on the inside of the walls, and you go and add this on the outside. I know in the past I've heard stories about how you're now changing the condensation point and the dew point to somewhere else, and sometimes it's not where you want it. It's like in the wall, and now you've created a problem. Does your
Bang.
system entirely solve that because of your drainage channels, or does it still? Is there something to be conscious of with that?
So yes, we do mitigate that 100%. We purposely manufacture 2-inch minimum thickness to prevent that ever from happening. So 99% of the climatic regions in Canada, you know, 2 inches or more will push you out of that inboard outboard challenge, that ratio.
Okay,
You can go into a big box store today and buy half-inch insulation. That's
right,
that's where the challenge becomes an issue. And they're, do it yourself homeowner or ladder and truck guy, hey, it's foam. We're doing something here.
right.
And there's not a big red symbol on the insulation saying do not use. No one's policing that, right? So how we've managed that market and police that market is we limit the thickness and the challenge, and we educate our dealers, distributors on educating the client on that sense. And then we have obviously a great technical group that the hotline that people could run in for. But that's where that moisture management corrugated design came in the beginning. It was if and when that became ever a concern, because we're always talking hypothetical and modeling, but if it ever became a concern, at least our product could offer a drying potential. And
Yeah.
that's the history of where that kind of was born.
Well, we've come full circle, and I think that's a really great way to end today's chat. Super impressive Canadian success story, Canadian resiliency story. In fact, a lot of our guests are Canadian resiliency stories, because entrepreneurship in this country is tough. And so I want to applaud you guys for how far you've come and how you've stuck with it and how much you've innovated. For anybody out there, how can they get a hold of you and Quick Therm?
The easiest way would be heading to our website, and all our information, our contacts there, and reach out to us, and our team will get back right to you. Doesn't matter how small or complicated the question is.
And your website is
Quicktherm.com. Yes, yeah,
QUIKTHERM.com.
yeah.
So thank you so much, Jesse Watson. We really appreciate having you on Energy Insights today. We've learned a lot. If you're a homeowner, a builder, a developer, a REIT, an asset manager, building operator, general contractor, reach out to Jesse and his team. They're a fountain of knowledge, and they've got some really great products.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank you, guys.
everybody. Take care.